Welcome to Awakening Torah Mussar Mindfulness. I'm Rabbi Chasya Uriel Steinbauer, the founder and director of the Institute for Holiness, Kehilat Mussar Mindfulness. We will begin in 1 minute. Thank you for your patience. We now begin. Today is, now in Israel, where I am, Haaretz, in the Galil, it's Sunday morning. It just became Sunday morning in the middle of the night, but we like to call it Motzei Shabbat, right? So it's after the Sabbath, Saturday, November 2nd of the Gregorian year 2024. The Hebrew date, of course, we entered the second day of the Hebrew month of Cheshvan after Rosh Chodesh, the new moon. So in the Hebrew year, of course, it's Tafshin Pei He, 5785. Welcome to this year of Torah Mussar Mindfulness. We are now delving into Parashat NOACH, which we just, if you're privileged enough, you were able to hear read, or maybe you were even reading in a synagogue, in a minyan, wherever available, both in person and online. And if not, then you have a chance to study and read, hopefully with commentators. So I will tell us where we're beginning in Parshat Noach. You want to be in the book of Genesis in English. It's Bereshit, chapter 6, verse 9, through chapter 11, verse 32. So that's what it covers. And if you joined us for the first session last Shabbat of Bereshit, then you know that we're starting on a new journey this year here at the Institute for Holiness. I'm very excited to say, where our goal, kind of a matara, is to really introduce this path of Mussar mindfulness and to become familiar with some of our most beloved teachers and sages of Mussar and Mussar mindfulness, and for us to define a central middah, a soul trait, a personality trait from the Torah portion, and to also give some Mussar background and even suggested practice. And then very importantly, our large theme, we have many, of course, is acquiring Torah. And this comes from, of course, Pirkei Avot, the teaching in the Mishnah, the rabbinic texts, where there are sometimes, depending on which version you have, between 48 and 51 ways of acquiring Torah, right? Acquiring Torah as in the wise instruction, way of being, the path of the Jewish people. Through, when I mean Torah, I mean more than the 5 books of Moshe, right? What some know as part of the Hebrew Bible. So in Pirkei Avot, as we had learned last week, we learned the first way. It has to be a whole path, of course, but the first way is limud, right? Is learning and studying Torah, which is different than acquiring Torah. It's one of the ways that we have to engage in on our path towards acquiring Torah. So why are we engaging in this? Because we see this path of Mussar mindfulness, of daily discipline, lifelong practice, in a VAD, in a community, in a group, with master teacher, with delving into the tradition and texts, with our own integrity and practice, really honestly looking at ourselves and how we treat ourselves, how we are in relationship with others, and the relationship with the divine, right? that is acquiring Torah. That is part of the whole path. You know, if you recall last week, I told you about our beloved sage, Rebbe Israel Salanter, right? The founder of the modern Mussar movement. He was known for Torat Mussar, right? This really way of living and teaching Torah as Mussar as the path, essentially, and really acquiring Torah that way. So we continue in his honor and in this path. And we thank all of the people who, of course, have reached out to make suggestions of what they think the master middah of this Parashat NOACH is and should be. Thank you for your votes, which you could have voted, for instance, through the podcast. One of the podcast systems had a poll associated with it. And of course, through all the different Mussar Vadim that we have. So this week is going to be Tzedek, often translated as justice, but it's also, the meaning of it is righteousness. And so we're going to look at what does it mean to be righteous, particularly with Noach, but how it applies to us in the path. If we're going to practice and cultivate it as a part of our interior world, of building our interior world, as Rav Wolbe says, Master Mussar teacher, that we have to cultivate the middah in a balanced way. And so we'll take a look at that. So how do we acquire Torah this week? It's through Shemiat HaOzen. Okay, Shemiat HaOzen gets translated as attentive listening. I like to consider it wise listening. Just like we have wise speech, for instance, in the path of the Dharma, this is wise listening, attentive listening. So we'll be blessed enough with God's help to address that. So how it's going to run this week is we're going to look in what is Shemiat HaOzen, what is this way of acquiring Torah, how does it manifest in this Torah portion, where we'll go into Noach, get to know it a little, why he really exemplifies this cultivation of tzedek as a middah, as righteousness, and then we'll touch base a little bit about what is Mussar and this path. And I'm really considering something, so you can always reach out to us in the comments and send an email to me at Rabbi Chasya at kehilatmussar.com. I came across a teaching of Rav Salanter's where he had really understood, as I had mentioned earlier, this idea of Torat Mussar, this idea of the Torah of Mussar, right? There's something to gain there. And I thought, well, perhaps this really should be this awakening that we offer as a public offering here each week, that this should be Torat Mussar Mindfulness, right? This sense of this is how we acquire Torah. This is our Torah that we are offering. May we merit it in honor of our ancestors like Rav Israel Salanter. So with your help and intention today, may we merit really learning together, be on this path together, and continuing to grow and support one another. So we begin. B'ezrat Hashem, God willing. Okay. So, Shemiat HaOzen. How do we acquire Torah through Shemiat HaOzen? So, just to even give you a little bit of background of what this is, okay, is we acquire Torah, we have to developing a listening ear, right? Which it really, to understand this in the Mishnah, it's really translated as a careful listener, right? Careful is to be attentive, meaning full of care, full of mindfulness, full of attention. I'm here and I'm listening to the best as I can, right? And so often what's behind it, you hear this often when people talk about, wow, someone's a really excellent listener. It's not just that they heard the words that someone spoke. but there's an emotional intelligence with it. And they hear what's not being spoken either. They hear the story behind what is being shared. And so obviously Shmiat comes from Shema, the root, right? Shen min ayin, to hear, to listen, even to obey, right? And Ozen obviously is here, right? So there's this real wise listening. Wise because, as I said, you're sensing what is all there and what is being shared, what you're listening to. Okay, and it's very important on this path of acquiring Torah that we attempt to do so. Why? Because listening, as we know from Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, the central prayer of Judaism. Listen, Israel, obey Israel, right? Why? God, Adonai Eloheinu, God, Adonai is our God, right? Hashem is our God. Adonai Echad, God is one, unity. So this listening is a very special place in Jewish practice on the path. It's the primary affirmation, declaration of emunah, faith in the one God, right? It's what we recite morning and evening as a practice, right? From the liturgy. It requires real concentration during the prayer, so much so that we have it as practice to close the eyes or to cover the eyes. Why do we cover or close the eyes as we do in meditation? At least we attempt to. Because we want to block out any visual stimulation if we have vision, if we have eyesight, that we don't allow ourselves to become distracted. So we seek to take on a methodology, a practice, right, to block that out. And so there's that real practice to eliminate distraction, to facilitate deep concentration, which these are key, right? Eliminating distraction, facilitating deep concentration is wise listening, attentive listening. So how do we do that when we're listening to someone, to anyone? Do we seek out distractions? Do we look around at the other people walking by while we're listening? Do we start telling what we want to say back to the person in our head ahead of time? No. We eliminate distraction. We try to be fully there. And you know when someone's fully there and they're listening to you. You finally feel that you are really seen as that which is created in the image and likeness of the divine. To facilitate deep concentration, this is part of the wise listening. This is a part of acquiring Torah. We can't do it without it. So it's obviously quite possible to recite this prayer or be in any conversation through rote or just a quick way, right? And it misses the point. It misses the point of the conscious, effective, and essentially declaration. I am hearing. There's a sincere inner affirmation. And in this case of the Shema, for instance, of the one divine source, the power of all in the universe. And so when we enter that without distraction and facilitate deep concentration, we experience an accurate assessment of truth, of humility, of anava, of our place in the world, no more than no less. So it's where our inner being can be like, I recognize the yoke of heaven, the divine, and I deeply heard, right? I deeply listened to what was just said. It's very important, right? It involves so many other midot that have to be balanced to really be able to be present, to listen. So this is our second way of acquiring Torah, Shemiat ha'ozen, right? So now we know that we're involved in studying and learning together on this path, and that we're also attempting to develop this real attentive, wise listening as part of the path. So we will continue. So what does this have to do with Noah? right? What does this have to do with this beautiful ancestor of ours? I have so much to say that I have to narrow it, of course. But let me give you a summary of the Torah portion as I do every week in case you have not learned it yet. You still have time. Jump in. So in this week's Torah portion, which we just passed, of course, right? Which fell actually yesterday, which was Aleph, Rishon Shel, sorry, I'm speaking Hebrew, the first of Cheshvan, the first of the day for us. So what happens? All creatures become corrupt, and the world is full of what is called Hamas, not the terrorist organization. Hamas meaning violence and oppression. And so God decides to destroy the world and commands Noach to build a teva in order to save that which can progenerate the next generation, essentially creation too. Noach is told to get himself and his family 2 of every non-kosher animal, 14 of every kosher animal. I think the better way to say this is not so much kosher, is 2 of that which is not pure. The language of tameh is not used. It is just shelo tahor, okay, that is not pure. That has its own drash in it, its own commentary and teaching. But so 2 of every animal that's not pure, and 14 of animal that's considered pure into the teva. So we're saving all. If you want to talk about, people always talk about saving humanity. I would say this is saving all sentient beings that are outside of the human being, and then the human beings are Adam and his family, his immediate family. It rains for 40 days and 40 nights, creating a flood that destroys everything. The flood lasts for 150 days. Noach sends out a raven and then a dove to see if the waters have gone away. The dove returns with an olive branch in its mouth, which becomes the symbol of peace, especially in Jewish culture, in the state of Israel, and in our history. God tells Noach to leave the teva, the ark, and repopulate the earth and start to develop the land in a way that benefits all of humanity. God promises never to destroy the world again through a flood, and makes the keshet, the rainbow, as the sign, as the brit, the covenant, the sign of the covenant, of that, the sign of that promise. So many generations of people are born, and all the people of the world speak the same language and begin to build a migdal. God confuses the people with different languages, and so the place is called Bavel, okay, which means confusion. And God scatters the human beings throughout the earth the way God intended. That God intended after Noach for the people to repopulate and to scatter all over the earth. A quick drash on that may be that they did stay in one language and closely with one another, probably out of fear of another flood, fear that something huge would take the lives of humanity again. So to offer compassion to them of why they stayed in one location with one language may have been very, very much that. Okay, so that's a summary. Now, I'm going to tell you the main thrust that we see going on here in this Torah portion, which is essentially, it comes down actually to a machloket, an argument, which we'll bring up soon. Keep that word in mind, machloket, argument, between 2 famous Amoraim, which are essentially your sages that come after the Tanaim, who drafted the Mishnah and the first parts of the Babylonian Gemara. This is 3rd century CE. Rabbinic sages coming to continue the ongoing arguments and discussions for the sake of heaven, to really flesh out what is the path of the Jewish people? How do we walk in the ways that Hashem wants us to, which we call halacha, Jewish law, the way that we walk, right? But this comes down to how people really begin to view Noach Okay, so the key thing is the text that comes in chapter 6, verse 9. Ele toldot Noach. This is the generations, the story of Noach. Noach ish sadiq tamim. Okay, he was a righteous, unblemished, pure person, right? Haya b'toratav, in his generation, et ha'elokim hithalech Noach. And Noach walked with God. So immediately, our rabbis and sages, and all the way until now in 2024, people say, what does it mean to call somebody righteous, tzedek, right, tzaddik, and tamim, hayad adoratav, in his generation? Okay, they jump on these words, in this generation. Why is this important to say? What does this tell us about Noach, if anything, which they feel it does? Is it meant to increase our appreciation for him, as if we should be judging? We already pay attention to the judgment mind of our ancestor Noach. So should this increase our appreciation, or should this meant as a criticism? So here come Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. I'll give you a quick background on them. They are, I have to tell you, probably I get emotional about them, actually. Probably my favorite chavruta, besides maybe Hillel and Shammai, but they loved one another. There was a love there. And yeah, I encourage you, I don't have time to go into their whole story. Maybe we will create time to get to know them more, but I'm going to see Reish Lakish as a Mussar sage, as someone who's coming to teach us something very important. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan comes to say, what does the Bedoratav mean? What is in the generation? He says, V'lo Bedorot Acharim. He's righteous and tamim, unblemished in this generation, in the generation of the flood, but not in any other generation. Ouch. Wow, Rav Yochanan. Shouldn't surprise you if you know Rav Yochanan. He's quite judgmental. So this is like, really? Okay. So we'll just hold that for now. We'll station it. Reish Lakish comes. Okay. And he says, what does Bedoratav mean? He says, Kol sheken Bedoratot acharim. All the more so in his generation, all the more so in other generations. What is he coming to teach? What does this mean? It means that he thinks that Noach lived righteously despite living during Hamas, awful violence, degradation, total, I don't even know what the words are to come out for it, dishonor and disrespect for God and God's earth. Okay? He says, despite living in the time of widespread wickedness, so even though he was surrounded by evil and evil people, right? And he had no one to encourage or support him, he still found a way to behave righteously without being influenced by the negativity of those around him. So all the more so in any other generation, where there are actually people who are both evil and not evil, right? Who maybe we would call righteous, right? But Rav Yochanan is just trying to say that he seemed righteous, right? But it only seemed that way because the people were so terrible around him. Okay, so why is Reish Lakish special here? Let me tell you a little bit about him quickly. Reish Lakish in his youth was a bandit. So to understand a bandit back in the time of the 3rd century CE, it means that he went around, usually in a group of other criminals, stealing from people, okay? And he ends up coming across Rav Yochanan bathing in a river. That's a whole story you can read about yourself, because I'm not even going to get in the interpretation of it. But basically, he ends up, Reish Lakish and Rav Yochanan end up talking, and Rav Yochanan convinces Reish Lakish to come and use his strength for learning Torah, and they essentially agreed to become chavruta, learning partners. And Reish Lakish learns with Rav Yochanan all the way until the tragic end of his life, which I'm not going to share now, but it is tragic. So why is this important? Because Reish Lakish walked the walk. Reish Lakish sinned. Reish Lakish did evil behavior. Reish Lakish knew what it was like to be surrounded by evil, to even have participated in it, and he left. He did teshuvah. He turned away from that path towards the righteous path, towards holiness, towards Torah, acquiring Torah. Okay? That's a huge feat, right? So he knew, he was able to recognize if Noach is listening to God, is building a teva, which I will get into how laborious that was, saving his family, saving all the rest of sentient beings, all of animals and that we know of. And he wasn't participating in the evil. Reish Lakish recognized him. Reish Lakish said, this is a man that is not only righteous in that generation, he'd be righteous in any. He'd be even more righteous. He didn't say this, but I would even say, if he had the encouragement and support of other righteous men and women around him. Okay, so that's our first teaching. That's our first teaching from a Mussar sage of Reish Lakish. I encourage you to look him up along with Rav Yochanan, beautiful chavruta relationship couple. So we'll leave it at that because of timing. So because there's so much bias towards Noach, even today, people will be like, he wasn't righteous. Why? Because they compare him to Avraham. They say he didn't speak up on the behalf of all the other humanity. He didn't try to argue with God and say, what if there are 10 righteous people left? Like the way Avraham did during the story and the history of Sodom and Amorah, right? So this is what I have to say about this. If we have to listen closely to the stories, this is Shmiat HaOzen, the practice of it, right? Okay, first thing first. Avraham never stepped foot in Sodom and Amorah. He did not live among the people. He didn't see that they came to people's doors attempting to rape them, which is what they did at his nephew's house, Lot, when the angels visited. He didn't actually come down and see how evil, how full of Hamas, corruption, and violence was happening in Sodom and Amorah. He should have actually, if he had listened, if he had actually acquired Torah for Shemiat HaOzen, he should have had an inkling that they were on this path towards evil, because they were the ones who had kidnapped. They were part of the army of kings and people who had kidnapped Lot and his whole family, and Avraham had to go to war to get Lot back. So when God comes down to visit Avraham and says, I'm going to destroy Sodom and Amorah, and Avraham, says, really, can you really do this? What if there are 50 righteous people? And he goes through all the way down to 10, because for him, it's acceptable to destroy Sodom and Amorah if there are only 9 righteous people. So meaning the innocent, 9 innocent are okay to die or acceptable, because the Hamas, the violence and the corruption is so great that unfortunately the innocent have to die with the majority. That is the cap number. It has to be at least 10 righteous, according to our ancestors and ancient Near Eastern wisdom. That this is the level, right? So that's what he argues on behalf of a people he doesn't know and hasn't really seen how corrupt and full of violence they are. Okay, he's not at all like Noach, who lives among people, who has to witness the violence every single day. And this is not normal violence. Let's just take a little look at this. By the 10th generation after Adam, right, human evil had reached the ultimate depths. Okay, we are told through midrashim and story that that is so bad, the moral pollution is so great that the limits of divine tolerance have been breached. Now, you might be thinking, well, should there be limits of divine tolerance? Does that make you feel uncomfortable to hear that? Well, it shouldn't. Or maybe it should, and you have to just learn to live with being uncomfortable with that. Why? Because you think about our path, Mussar mindfulness, right? What does the Dharma, mindfulness, have to teach us? It has to teach us karma. And what is karma? It means there are consequences for our behavior. We can't get out of them. We might not be visited with the consequence immediately after our deed, but we will eventually, and other people will too. If we have done something evil, corrupt, morally full of pollution, it is causing harm and suffering, not only to us, but to others and to sentient beings in the earth, to the earth itself. So it's say you don't have a relationship with the divine. Say that you are more humanist. Let me say this. Global warming, climate crisis, climate change, nuclear proliferation, genocides, war, you name it, that is happening right now in our earth. And how is the earth responding? If you don't believe that it's divine intervention, that there's been a cap of divine tolerance, well, then call it sentient being, the world, the universe's limit of tolerance. Karma has set in, right? There are consequences for our behavior of allowing nuclear proliferation, of allowing climate crisis, climate change, global warming, of allowing genocide, or God forbid, perpetuating it, for allowing all the things that go on, right? And so we have to face that there are consequences for our behavior, and there is a tolerance that we're bearing the burden of, and eventually that will be breached. So the way we see it, according to our ancestors in our tradition, is that what happens here in NOACH, in the story, is that this is the limit of divine tolerance of what's going on here. The world, as a result, is going to be purged of its corruption. Just like what we say here now of what's happening today, the world will be purged. It's already beginning to happen with hurricanes, you name it. Okay, so the flood is this cosmic catastrophe. It's an undoing of creation. Now, I want to just touch very briefly on that. The deluge itself, this big flood, right, is brought about by the release and the virtual reuniting of the two halves of the primordial waters, the waters of the sky and the waters of the oceans, right, of the sea, that they were separated. I believe it was on day 3 of creation. Forgive me for not knowing the exact day from the top of my head. I think it's day 3. They were separated, right? And what happens on that day 3? God willing, I hope I'm right, it's day 3. Let me see if I can quickly just look. I'll look it up and get back to you. It actually, God doesn't actually say, out of all the other days of creation, God says, and it was good, right? And of course, with the human, it's very good. But on the day when the primordial waters are separated, God does not say it was good. And of course, our sages, our tradition, we notice that. So why was that not good? And what do we say? Because division was created. Machloket. Division and argument was created, right? In the sense of, it's a way of saying that something had to happen that sometimes comes with it not good. And I think it's very appropriate that the undoing, God almost realizing that was maybe not so, maybe it was a mistake, maybe recognizing, if it's not a mistake, then recognizing that there was no kitov, it was not good, that division was created. And So it's the undoing of that creation, undoing of the Hamas, of the moral pollution, the violence of humanity gets undone by bringing those two primordial waters back together. Something very profound about that, at least for me. Okay, so Noah, his ark is going to be the matrix of a new creation, creation two. Okay, and the one in which he lives in harmony with animals, just like Adam did. And so I will just say one thing. Noah also gets criticized that he's not righteous enough like Moshe Rabbeinu, right? That I want to just say that Noah did not argue at all that he was unworthy for the task and the job. Moshe, if you recall, argues, not me, I'm not your man, I have a heavy tongue, I can't speak, I can't do this job, pick somebody else. Noah did not pause for a minute. Okay, taking those qualities, look, it looks like I'm raising my hand because it happens every time I talk to you, right? Which is, if you're watching by video, you will see I use my hands a lot when I'm teaching. So this is very important. We have somebody who has balance zerizut, balance enthusiasm, balance emunah, faith in God, balance bitachon, trust in God, right? It gives him strength. The minute he hears the call, go build teva, an ark, he doesn't say, oh God, not me. I don't know, I have heavy tongue or heavy hands, or pick somebody else to do it. I can't do this. I mean, you could imagine receiving the message, I'm about to undo all of creation, except for you and your family and all the animals. How heavy that must have been. Okay, it's not a small task that he listens and obeys. He does the attentive listening, the wise listening. He is from that generation. He knows how evil and corrupt it is. He knows that he must follow through. Now, I will say one last thing, because people have such criticisms of Noah. That what is this middah? Before I get into the middah, is I wanted to share briefly, if I can find my text, what he built. Okay, it's not a small thing. Where's the information? Give me 1 second. Okay, he's given the job of building an enormous boat. Okay, it's not. I wouldn't even call it a boat. It's larger than any fleet that probably we have out there today, okay? It is 450 feet long, longer than a football and a half field, okay? So a whole football field and another half of a football field, okay? 45 feet high, 3 floors, 300 different rooms. It is enormous. It took him years. Okay, so here he is with his family, 120 years to build an ark. Talk about zerizut, enthusiasm, which we call that first you have to have wise discernment. Should I do this task? Am I the person to do it? Do I have the resources and skills, right? So obviously with God's help, he does. But 2, you have to have the follow through. You have to see the project to the end. Those are 2 different skills built into cultivating that middah of zerizut, of enthusiasm. And he does it. So you could imagine the sounds of sawing and hammering and building were in the air for a very long time. If anything, I would say it was his avodah, his service, for 120 years of keeping himself busy on this mitzvah for God, right? To do this is part of what kept him out of trouble, out of the evil of the people around him, because he kept busy with what God had commanded him to do. This is no small thing. This is part of righteousness. So let's get into this middah of tzedek, of righteousness, okay, to understand why I've selected this as the master middah. Now, of course, you can see all these other middot, soul traits that we practice cultivating in Mussar. I've already mentioned zerizut, enthusiasm. I've mentioned anava, humility. I've mentioned emunah, faith. I've mentioned bitachon, trust in God. There's so many things, right? But let's look at this. So let's look at the exact language. When I quoted for you in verse 6-9 that he is a ish sadik tamim hayad adoratav. He is righteous and blameless. Okay, he walks with God. So let's look at these language. So sadik has its origin in legal terminology and implies one who is adjudged to be in the right. Okay, which means it has its meaning in such texts in Exodus and Deuteronomy and Proverbs. We see it throughout the Torah. And these are qualities that are clearly recognizable, quality of virtue favored by Hashem, by God. So Sadiq describes one whose conduct is found to be beyond reproach by the divine judge. The word tamim, it's mostly found in ritual context, right? Describes, for instance, a sacrificial animal, one that will be given in sacrifice, that is without blemish. It's found in Exodus and Leviticus. Okay, only such an animal is acceptable to God. As applied to human beings, tamim acquired a moral dimension, connoting unblemished by moral faults, a person of unimpeachable integrity. Such a person enjoys God's fellowship. Hence, we have the language, Et ha'elokim hitalech Noach. With God he walked. With God he walked. Could you imagine? So these are our people, right? This is amazing. This is someone who cultivates tzedek, righteousness, right? If we look at the middah, balance tzedek is Noach. Okay, he's someone who listens to God, stays out of trouble by doing avodat Hashem, by doing service to God, 120 years of labor building that ark. He doesn't argue against God, doesn't say, I'm not your person, doesn't come in with kind of low self-esteem, low worth, what we call too much humility, and say, I'm not your man, I'm not your person to do the job. He doesn't do that, right? He also doesn't argue looking for 10 righteous people and a generation that God actually says right out to him, right? The world has become spoiled. It is filled with cruelty, violence, and robbery. Noach's almost like saying, yeah, I know I'm living here. I'm barely surviving here with my family. I know I am here to witness it. Unlike Abraham, who was not in Sodom and Gomorrah, right? He actually sees what is in front of him, okay? It's like, to be honest with you, it's like some of our wonderful allies, some of the former Muslims, or even some of the Palestinians who escaped Gaza, who escaped Hamas, who know how morally corrupt it is and had to escape and had to leave, right? They are there, they witness it, they know what's going down on the ground. And so it's very important to listen to those voices. They're not coming and saying to you, oh, guess what? I found 9 righteous people or 10 righteous people in Hamas or Hezbollah. Or you don't hear that because it doesn't exist. Okay. And so we have to practice part of the Dharma of seeing clearly. It's not seeing things how we wish or want them to be, that we so badly wish there were 10 righteous people, right? No, you have to see things clearly. When something has become so morally corrupt that it's staining the earth, right? So Noach is this person who cultivates this. He is unbelievable. He really is this amazing role model. So if we have our middah, he's in the middle. The extreme side is someone who is not doing any justice. Okay, he's committing Hamas, violence, corruption, everything that you see to it. These are the people of the flood. These are the people that we know as Islamic jihadists who are trying to take over the world. This is what you're seeing here, right? Over here on the other extreme are people who sacrifice themselves too much, right? Who don't have good boundaries. They don't draw lines. It's someone who often gets hurt, causes their own harm and suffering by not having those boundaries, right? Who, for instance, might have ended up being murdered, God forbid, in Sodom and Amorah by trying to seek out the righteous, to find any 10 righteous people, right? So you have to, when you're cultivating the middah, understand it's about the golden mean. It's about finding that balance of how can I really practice balanced righteousness as a human being, which means that it won't be perfect. Everyone looks for NOACH to be perfect, right? And they have so much judgment towards him, projecting onto him. He should have been more like Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher. You should have been more like Avraham Avinu, more like Abraham, our father. Always this kind of judgment towards him. And I just, in full humility between us right now, I just have to say, how many of us protect our family that way? How many of us would save all sentient beings, all animals, and keep them alive so that there'll be a new generation? How many of us would commit to doing service for God for 120 years? Maybe you can make it smaller for yourself, 20 years, so that you could fulfill that commandment, that order. How many of us really are able to say that I am balanced in the middah of tzedek, of justice, of righteousness in this way, right? Who would not allow themselves to become corrupt by the evil around them. We have to take a dose of honesty and look in the mirror, and a little less judgment towards our ancestor in the Torah. So that is NOACH, and that is the middah of tzedek. So I will close with some teachings on Mussar, and we will move into practice as we usually do, okay? So let me put some of my literature down. I'll say one final thing about tzedek, which is so important, that it's the quality of being able to both discern one's place in the world, which NOACH did very well. He knew what was around him. He knew what was being commanded of him, and to act skillfully and compassionately, right? So he has compassion for his family and all the animals that he cares for, regardless of the popularity of one's discernment. So it's very clear that no one else listening to him building an ark for 120 years, no one else joined in. No one had curiosity. No one came and said, what are you doing? I would like to participate too. Right? He had to rely on his own wise discernment and follow through with something that was not popular, something he had to do alone with his family. Tzedek is righteousness as a middah, as a confident sense of directed moral mission. These are the words of Rabbi Andy Kahn coming from the Mussar Torah commentary. I think that's a beautiful definition and so important to us today, right? Coming out of the genocide of October 7th, 2023, fighting this global war of now on 8 fronts, right? What are we doing? We are fighting the proliferation of Iran and its proxies, this kind of global jihadist movement. It's so important that we strengthen ourselves with our moral mission. So with that, Mussar connects Ben Adam lemakom, which is our relationship to God, to the divine. Ben Adam lachavaro, our relationship to other human beings. I might add actually to all sentient beings, not just chavaro, right? It's this idea of devotion, of service to God and all sentient beings. Some people say devotion to God and humanity. And it does this, right? This devotion, this practice, this path, right? Because it unifies this path of our concern with how are we in relationship with God, how are we in relationship with other human beings and sentient beings, and also we do this through the path of cultivating and building our interior world, which is called Ben Adam le'etzmo or le'etzma, right? Between the human being and her or his self. And it's this amazing spiritual discipline in Judaism, right? That we work on ourselves, we work on integrity, which is what NOACH demonstrates for us. We serve both human beings and sentient beings and God. And it's this beautiful path, right? It's very important. It's why we are cultivating this path. So I had introduced to you last time that meditation, mindfulness meditation, coming out of the Dharma of what I learn and practice of Theravada Buddhism, which is that we have to train the mind to be able to witness ourselves without reactivity. And even more than that, to be able to witness ourselves with curiosity and with kindness, with chesed, with loving kindness, and with self-compassion. And we not only look at our thoughts to know a thought is a thought and no more, we also look at our deeds and we look at our speech in this path. And we analyze them. We look at them, as I said, as a witness to see what's going on. And how we build that spiritual muscle is through daily meditation, whether you start with 2 minutes because you're a beginner or sit 45 minutes a day as an advanced practitioner. We do this through this sitting practice to develop this awareness, what Rav Salanter called the sensitivity step in the practice. It's really developing concentration and a clear and focused mind. And one of the ways that I discuss that sometimes people do it also to have outside of the cushion, outside of meditating, is a symbol, which in Mussar, a lot of people, I will show you mine, use a rubber band. This comes from Rabbi Per, taught to my teacher, Dr. Alan Morenis, that people wear a rubber band. Now I wear Alma Ani Moda. About what am I grateful? Because I start with gratitude. I start with Hakarat Tov, a recognizing of the good in order to see clearly, right? In order to appreciate that I'm alive and I'm here to serve. And so having this rubber band acts as a kind of a reminder that I'm on the path. I'm practicing. It's similar to wearing tzitzit. If you wear a talit katan, right, it's a ability to remind yourself of the commandments. It can also serve as a mussar tool to remind you that, like, which middah you're practicing and on the path. For others, it's the head or hair covering, kippah, kasui rosh. Some Jews or practitioners, it can be Magen David, a Star of David, or whatever it might help you. So there are ways that we bring what we practice and do on the cushion or on the meditation, out as mindfulness and our daily mussar work outside and how we live our lives. So this next practice is a further awareness practice, mindfulness practice. This one actually comes, I believe it comes from Cheshbon HaNefesh, 1811, work from, it's a Mussar text by Rabbi Menachem Mendel Leffen. And he tells a story of two young men who took it upon themselves to pray with devotion, right? With real, like the Shema, like Shemiat Ha'ozen, real attentive listening, right? Being present. They did it with devotion, concentration at the meaning of the text. And in the end, one of the men became misled in his prayer, while the other became a famous scholar, right? A fine human being, a great devotee to God. And so when they asked him, how did you merit meeting this level of service to God? He says, for many years, I took it upon myself to focus my mind on a single thought, either Torah or prayer, for a specific period of time. By doing so, I eventually trained myself to be able to concentrate for an hour or more. Now, that is essentially mindfulness meditation. It can also be applied as a concentration meditation on a particular word, a prayer, a phrase, which is different than mindfulness meditation, which is that you're just witnessing whatever arises, right? But the fact of witnessing whatever arises, is a focus of the mind on a single thing, right? So basically, this meditative form becomes very popular in Mussar tradition, and even today, of hitbonenut, right? Which essentially translates as to make oneself brilliantly aware, which is part of the Dharma path too, that we are to make our minds brilliantly aware, right? And powers of concentration, clear, focused mind, this is part of the path. And so, a lot of people do this with the Shema that I pointed out earlier. But today, I wouldn't say but, and today, we are going to practice doing this with a beautiful phrase. I have so many texts that I picked out here. We are going to do this with the phrase Tzadik Yesod Olam, okay? Which comes from Proverbs chapter 10, verse 25, which translates as the Tzaddik, the righteous one, right, is the foundation of the universe. So the one who cultivates righteousness, following their moral compass of what is right and wrong, following what God wants them to do, right? Following when it's not popular, following, and just amazing follow through that moral mission, right? Especially understanding that the road and the path is long. He did it for 120 years, NOACH, right? I mean, if you think about it, with this war that's been going on since October 7th, 2023, I should say October 8th, people are so impatient, as if it should just been over in a month. There's no tolerance anymore for an unclear, seeing clearly and understanding that wars against evil, wars and a moral mission take time. Painful, yes. Loss of innocent life, yes. So with that, we enter Tzadik Yesod Olam. Our cultivation of righteousness is the foundation of the universe. So with that, I want you to assume your posture that you normally do for our meditation. For some of you, that will be lying down because you live with back pain or chronic pain. The last thing you need or want is for you to sit. For others, it'll be walking back and forth, what we call walking meditation. You're not going anywhere in particular. You're just walking mindfully, right? Listening to me as I lead the meditation. For others, it'll be standing in a strong mountain pose that you really feel secure. I'm going to be seated as I usually am. I come to the edge of my seat. I ground my feet deeply, pushing them into the ground, being held by Mother Earth. What a privilege, right? Ask for permission. Thank you. May I put my feet here? My Savta and my Saba used to teach before I took any flower or took anything from a tree, even leaned against a tree to ask permission first. So thanking my chair and my grounds right now. So really heavy in your sit bones, seated. Take a look around the room to know that you are centered and that you are here. If you live with any post-traumatic stress disorder that is acute and present right now, any mental illness, any depression, anxiety, please speak to your mental health care provider before you engage in meditation with me, unless you already have begun and you know that it's safe and okay for you and you know what to do. If you have any episodes where you are triggered and you're not here anymore, but you're able to come to awareness again that you are here, stop the meditation. Look around the room, bring yourself back to the present moment that you are safe and okay. It's very important. I want to validate that. I would never say keep meditating or try harder. That's not acceptable. For the rest of us who are not in acute post-traumatic stress disorder, I think I'm close because of the ongoing missiles coming from Hezbollah. So I'll let you know if I think I crossed that line. For those of us who aren't there yet and are aware that we don't have mental illness and are not in depression or anxiety, if you feel safe and comfortable, I want you to close your eyes. Otherwise, lower your gaze. Rest your hands wherever it is comfortable. Some people like to hold their heart and chest and even rub. And we're going to begin with awareness of the breath. Deep inhalation and exhale. This time, inhalation, and I want your exhalation to be double the amount of time. So inhalation. So for me, that was 1, 2, 3. And exhale, try to allow it to be 6 if you're like me. 1, 2, 3, 6. Again, this time inhalation, raising the shoulders up to the ears. And exhale fully. Letting the shoulders rest. Coming to this upright posture where you really feel dignity. Dignified, created in the image and likeness of the divine. Sitting here in community, cultivating this practice of Mussar Mindfulness, Torat Mussar Mindfulness, being on the path together. So kindly doing a quick scan, recognizing what is here for you with your body. Moving from your toes, flowing gently through your body, up to your head, taking your time to do so, and just being a witness to whatever is here, what is calling for your attention, if anything. No need to react, no need to fix it or change anything, just simply being with whatever is here. Now, the same goes with mindfulness of thoughts. Scanning your mind. Scanning your thoughts. Anything here right now calling for your loving attention. Simply honor it, whatever it is. Mine feels very clear tonight. I'm not noticing any thoughts emerging right now. It doesn't mean they won't come later. The mind always produces thoughts. That's the practice. Recognizing it and bringing ourselves back to our anchor, our breath, and my voice. Now bringing your mindful attention to what we call mindfulness of emotions. How are you right now? What is your state? What emotional states are arising right now, if any? Simply cradling them, holding them, making room for them in the guest house. All is welcome. And if you can't tolerate something, simply honor that. No need to necessarily push it away, but just say, I can't deal with this right now. I'm going to try to compartmentalize and put it to the side so I can be present if something really hard emerged for you. Bringing in compassionate voice, understanding that every practitioner goes through all sorts of emotions, all sorts of sensations of the body, and all sorts of thoughts throughout the practice of mindfulness meditation. And now we're going to shift to enter our concentration to a well-cited quote from Jewish literature, which I had brought to you from Proverbs. Sadiq Yesod Olam. The righteous one is the foundation of the universe. Sedek Yesod Olam. Righteousness is the foundation of the universe. So we're going to concentrate on this idea, on these words, bringing them to the forefront of your mind. We say Sadiq Ketamar. Sadiq is like the tall palm tree, beautiful tall palm tree. Sadiq Yesod Olam. The righteous one is the foundation of the world, the universe. Sedek, righteousness, this middah that we are cultivating, this moral compass. This is the yesod, the foundation of the olam, of the universe, of the world. Seeing and hearing these words, practicing shmi'at ha'ozen, this attentive, mindful, wise listening. Listen to the quiet, still voice inside. What does it want you to hear when I say Sadiq, Yesod Olam, the righteous one, is the foundation of the world, of the universe? What is that pure point, that Nekodat Hashem, that point of godliness within you? What does it hear? What does it need to hear? What does it need you to listen to? When we say Sadiq, Sedek, righteousness, Yesod Ha'olam, is the foundation of the universe, of the world. Understanding that your middah of Sedek, of righteousness, is the foundation of your interior world, is the foundation of your midot, of your soul traits, your personality traits. Sadiq Yesod Olam. Sadiq Yesod Olam. Sedek Yesod Olam. Sadiq Yesod Olam. Chant with me, however you need, whether it's quiet, loud, singing, chanting. Sadiq Yesod Olam. Sadiq Yesod Olam. Sadiq Yesod Olam. Sadiq Yesod Olam. Sedek Yesod Olam. Sadiq Yesod Olam. Sedek Yesod Olam. Sadiq, Sadiq, Sadiq Yesod, Yesod Olam. Sadiq Yesod Olam. Sadiq Yesod. Sadiq. Righteousness. May your righteousness flourish like the beautiful palm tree. May your righteousness form the foundation of your interior world. Concentrating on these words, concentrating on what you need to hear in this message today. What is your Shmiat HaOzim? What is your attentive listening, hearing in this message today? This is the practice. This is acquiring Torah. Torat Mussar Mindfulness, Torah Mussar Mindfulness. How are you acquiring this path today? We'll spend the next minute in silence, and then I will pull us out of our meditation for today. Sadiq Yesod Olam. You had your eyes shut in this meditation. Gently and slowly open them, allowing the light to slowly filter in. If you have vision, if it's your practice to bow, please do so. Bowing to Hashem, to the Almighty, bowing to our ancestors for this beautiful path, bowing to each other for supporting each other on this path in our Vad Sangha. Thank you. Thank you for today, the learning and the practice, the acquiring Torah. There goes one of my books. So grateful to be here with you. As I said last week, we are delighted by all the interest in sponsorships, either in loving memory of someone or in honor of someone. We have a number signed up and ready for particular weeks where they pick which Torah portion they want. So please be in touch with us to financially support us of $50 to sponsor one of these episodes that reaches out to the world, B'ezrat Hashem, God willing, as we learn and engage and follow this path together. I thank you for your time and practice and commitment, and be in touch. We look forward to meeting next Motzei Shabbat, which of course we will go into Lech Lecha, meeting our beloved ancestor Avraham, who will start off as Avram. So thank you again. I'm Rabbi Chasya Steinbauer, the founder and director of the Institute for Holiness.